Hi, everyone. Welcome or welcome back. I hope you're doing well today. This is going to be another installment of Villette, and I want to give a special shout out to a commenter whose name I'll probably butcher trying to pronounce, but Konius Hashem. Thank you so much for asking about Villette, for reading along with me, and yeah, I have really neglected this video series, and I think what I'll do today is go over a few more chapters where we last left off, and then kind of explain what happened. Why did I get a bit annoyed with this book? I do intend to finish it by the end of the year, so I think I'm going to be somewhat begrudgingly picking it up again, but let's just get into it, and maybe it'll become self-explanatory as we go. So previously, right, we had this quite dramatic set of events in which Lucy Snowe, she's all by herself during this vacation where the students are away, most of them, and she goes for a long walk. She gets very, very depressed. She passes out at one point, I believe, and then is rescued. She ends up waking up at her godmother's home, Mrs. Breton, and realizes that Dr. John is Mrs. Breton's son, which is sort of the big reveal of this book, which we talked about at length last time. So where are we now? So Lucy in chapter 17, she's still with the Bretons and she's recuperating. Dr. John is taking them on little trips to see things. Like, it's kind of a real vacation for Lucy now. So that was really lovely to see. And I guess maybe you might say convenient for the narrative, but nonetheless, it kind of gets Lucy out of the very claustrophobic, highly structured, lonely existence of the school and places her in a different setting with very different people. She reconnects with Mrs. Breton, her beloved godmother, and yeah, gets to see a few things around this city. So I think the first couple of chapters here, so we're looking at chapters 17 through like the middle of chapter 20, and these chapters here are kind of establishing the feelings that Lucy has for Graham, Dr. John. I guess I'll call him Graham from here out because that's how she knew him first. Although she keeps calling him Dr. John, which is interesting. Why do you suppose she keeps calling him that, even though she knows now who he is? Yeah, food for thought. But either way, we get to see how she feels about him in greater detail. Madame Beck does come to visit, which doesn't go too well because she kind of had her sights on this guy. But yeah, ultimately we get these different exchanges between Lucy and Graham, and in particular they argue about Genevra, which is the 18-year-old student that Dr. John, somewhat questionably, I think, has fallen for, and Lucy's trying to call him out on it, really trying to show him that she's not worthy of his affection. And we know now that she has kind of this double motive. On the one hand, she really does feel that way about Genevra. She thinks she's shallow and not really taking others' feelings into consideration, but she also, Lucy that is, she also loves Graham, and this is tied back to her childhood crush, which is symbolized in the painting that hangs above, I think it's their fireplace. This painting of Graham when he was younger. And yeah, so, she's saying, oh, why do you keep giving her these gifts? She doesn't appreciate them. And then Dr. John is trying to tell her, oh, I think she has these great qualities. And yeah, so the end of chapter 18 is kind of curious. Lucy gets very frustrated with Graham at this point, but seems to think that maybe he is aware of what she's really like, what Genevra's really like, and that maybe he's not as naive as Lucy thinks. And one thing I like about these old Victorian novels is the way that these things are revealed is sometimes a bit peculiar. Like, she says, a blue subtle ray sped sideways from Dr. John's eye. It reminded me of old days. It reminded me of his picture. It half led me to think that part, at least, of his professed persuasion of Miss Fanshawe's naivete was assumed, etc., etc. So, by picking up on these very minor, very subtle pieces of body language, Lucy's putting together these narratives in her mind. And this is a very Lucy thing to do. She is very much tuned in to people's subtle actions, their body language, and then goes on to kind of construct these ideas from them, which may or may not be true. So they quarrel over that. And then chapter 19, this is kind of an example of one of their outings. They go to this art gallery together, and Graham leaves Lucy to wander, well, really to look at a few paintings while he wanders around, because that's what she wants to do here. And as luck would have it, Lucy's sitting there and she's looking at this majestic painting of Cleopatra, less clothed than otherwise. And then who does she meet but Monsieur Paul Emmanuel, the crusty old professor that previously put Lucy up to doing the play that she did not want to do. He locked her in the attic, essentially, and had her memorize the lines as best as she could, and then she went on to really enjoy the performance, and we remember that from last time. So yeah, and there's this little exchange between them, and the professor is like tutting at her, looking at this nude portrait and saying it's not suitable for young ladies, even though he's looking at all the same art himself. I think this is where, and it's funny because I think previously, when I first read this novel as a very naive teenager myself, I kind of liked their repartee. I kind of liked the dynamic between them. And there is still something there, but I think I'm picking up on a lot more red flags from Monsieur Paul Emmanuel. I think he is pretty, toxic is a word that's used a lot, but I genuinely think it's true here. It's interesting that there's a section in the Cleopatra chapter where Lucy's talking about this this student, the one that remained at the boarding house over the summer holiday. This student who has some kind of it seems like some kind of disability, developmentally, and she's not an easy person to be around. And Lucy's relating that Monsieur Paul has patience, but then when he loses his patience, she says his passions were strong, his aversions and attachments alike vivid. She uses the word vehement. He excited in ordinary minds fear and dislike. So, and it says, though, nothing soothed him like confidence tempered with gentleness. So he's kind of this fiery character, but if you're just patient and gentle with him, he'll be okay. But this sort of in the context of his dynamic with this student at the school, implying, I guess, that sometimes he lashes out at her in some way, probably yells at her or something. It doesn't exactly say, but yeah, I didn't love that for obvious reasons. I think that Lucy, in her admiration for this guy, for his resolve and his high standards, I think she likes his high standards. I think she's maybe making a few excuses for him. That's just my considered opinion after some years and experience myself. So I don't think in this chapter these two people meet, Graham and Monsieur Paul, but that's how she relates to Monsieur Paul in the art gallery. And then chapter 20, the concert. Now this is probably the most memorable chapter for me from when I read this as a teenager. And it's about, well, Mrs. Breton and Graham and Lucy going to a concert. And I think Monsieur Paul shows up as well. Of course he does. This is a Victorian novel. People meet anywhere and everywhere just when they should. Don't you wish life could be a little more like that sometimes? But yeah, this is the concert, and lots more commentary about this, the culture of this country that Lucy resides in, which she doesn't particularly like. But the thing that really rubbed me the wrong way was how Lucy looks to Graham for approval. And for context, Lucy has a lot of what we'd call today body image issues. She doesn't feel comfortable in her own skin. She doesn't feel comfortable dressing beautifully. There's this whole thing about her wearing a pink dress that Mrs. Breton picked out for her, and Lucy just wants to wear dark colors, you know. She wants to be not seen. And her first concern is whether Graham thinks she's being frivolous and attention grabbing. As soon as Graham gives his approval, or at least doesn't say that there's any problem there, or doesn't tease her, she feels okay to wear the gown to the concert. Which, you know, I think there's some elements here that perhaps many of us can relate to, you know, seeking approval of your crush or the person you're interested in romantically. But I think this is a huge issue with Lucy, and it's sad. And even in spite of the fact of her being such a strong, independent woman, quite literally in the fact that she's gone to another country and established, you know, kind of pulled herself out of the doldrums and poverty and landed on the shores of another country and has been teaching in a different, completely different setting than what she used to. She's still looking for approval from various male characters, and that's not just Monsieur Paul, who's very exacting, but also this Graham, who doesn't even like her in that way. So, yeah. And that's kind of where I paused. It's funny because I know I have some vague idea of what happens in the rest of the chapter as well. So I don't want to make any final conclusions about chapter 20 just based on the little I've read, but I think at this point I was getting very frustrated because I don't like this thing where Lucy is seeking approval from these men, but also I think Monsieur Paul is a lot more unpleasant than I remember him being. And I think it's because I just have a lower threshold for such attitudes and personalities than I used to. So I understand where Lucy's coming from. I absolutely do. And I also, after this many years, find it far less tolerable than I did. So that's kind of where I paused. I will continue reading Villette. It is fully my intention to finish it this year, but I'm going to continue reading it slowly. Also reading Wuthering Heights, so I'll have a update for Wuthering Heights soon, which is going very quickly and is full of unpleasant people, but not really looking for pleasantness in Wuthering Heights. So there you go. That's my progress with Villette. Let me know your thoughts. If you're reading along, feel free to share your impressions of these characters in these incidental meetings of them. These three characters keep meeting, right? So yeah, let me know. And thanks for watching. Bye.